Alrighty, Mishna Brura for today, Shulchan Aruch, chapter 51, numbers 4 and 5. Tzarich li zaher, you need to be careful. Milehafsik bedibur, from interrupting, stopping with speech. Mishe yatchil, from when you start. Baruch she'amar, ad sof shmone esrei, the Baruch she'amar, until the end of the Shmone Esrei. Now, Shmone Esrei literally means the 18. Shmone Esrei, 8 and 10. The 18, which means the Amidah. So, from the moment you've started Baruch She'amar until you finish the Shmone Esrei, you need to be careful not to stop, interrupt with speech. Ve'afilu, even, letzorech mitzvah ein ledaber. For the needs of a mitzvah, you should not speak bein Baruch She'amar lishtabach, between Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach. Alright, so we don't speak from there until Shmone Esrei. For a mitzvah, not even between Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach. Number 5, Bein HaMizmorim Ha'elu, between these Mizmorim, literally like these songs, between these songs, in other words, between Ashrei and Hallelujah, Sho'el Mipnei HaKavod, Umeshiv Shalom Lekol Adam. Now what he's saying over here is you get different levels of permitted interruptions. So there are times when you can respond for this reason, answer for this reason, initiate contact for this reason. So sho'el is to initiate contact. How's it, how you doing? Meshiv is to respond. Somebody walks up to you and says, how you doing? So you want to respond, how you doing? Now that can depend. Now generally it's easier to justify a response than initiating contact. After all, if you haven't said, if you're responding to somebody, you have the question of being rude. They've just greeted you. Are you going to reply, or are you going to be you're going to ignore them? Whereas when it comes to initiating contact, that's more difficult to justify because you're busy davening. Why are you talking to somebody? So these different levels over here. Sho'al mibnei kavod. You can greet someone for kavod, for respect, for honor. Somebody that you should be greeting, you can greet them in between the chapters, and you can respond to anyone. Meshiv shalom, reply shalom to any person. Uve'emtza hamizmor, and in the middle of the psalms, let's say halfway through Ashrei, sho'el mipnei hayira, you can ask because of fear or reverence, somebody whom you have to ask them because you're like afraid of them. I mean, we'll see examples, but let's say that the governor would walk in, the king would come in, so you have to say something. Umeshiv mimna kavod, and you can respond not to everyone, but somebody that you have an obligation to respect them. So we see these 3 levels of everybody, kavod, and then the highest is yira. So everybody that's in between chapters of Pesukei Zimra to reply. The kavod is to respond even in the middle, or to initiate in between. And yira is any time, to ask or respond any time. Now let's see the Mishna Brura on that. So the Mishna Brura says, Li zaher, you should be careful. Now it's about speaking in the middle of Pesukei Zimra. The Baruch She'amar have bracha shlifnei Pesukei Zimra, because Baruch She'amar have is the bracha before Pesukei Zimra. Ve'yishtabach have bracha shel acharei. Yishtabach is the bracha after it. Uvein yishtabach liyotzer, and between yishtabach and yotzer, halo asur lahafsik. Is it not so? Halo, from law, right? Halo. Is it not so that it is forbidden to make the interruption? Kedlakaman siman and dalet, as we see later on, chapter 54. Ume yotzer v'hala'a, and from yotzer hala'a onwards, have birchot kriyat shema, that is the blessings of kriyat shema. So you certainly can't talk in the middle of that. So from Baruch She'amar Yishtabach, you can't talk because you've got a bracha sandwiching the Pesukei Zimra. In the between Yishtabach and Yotzer Or, we'll see in chapter 54 why you can't interrupt. Once you've started Yotzer Or, you're in the middle of brachot themselves. Kata b'tshuvat makor Baruch siman aleph shirawi levatel haminhag shektzat noagin lahafsik kedei lahavi hachatan lebeit hakneset. It is appropriate, the Makor Baruch wrote, that it is appropriate, ra'ui, levatel, to negate, to stop, the minhag, the custom, that some, ktsat, some, a few people, have the noagin, have the custom, lafsik, to break, to interrupt, but in order to bring the chatan into the shul, in between Baruch She'amar and Yotzer. At some point during Psukat Zimra, they will stop the service, bring in the chatan and make a song and dance about it. And this minhag does not have koach yafeh, good power. This is not a good power. This is not a really justifiable thing to do. Leilech acharav, to go after it, to follow this. That's not a good minhag. Mila hafsik, to break. So to interrupt. So what exactly does that mean? B'chol makom, in every place, she'asur lehafsik, that it is forbidden to make the break. Afilu b'lashon hakodesh asur ledaber. Even in the holy language, in other words, Hebrew, even in the holy language, it is forbidden to speak. Ucheshet tzarich lehafsik mipnei eze ones. So in other words, it makes no difference whether it's Hebrew or English or some other language. And when you do need to break, mipnei eze ones, for some, ones literally means forced, but what it means is factor beyond your control. In other words, okay, there's something going on that you really need to work out. Or b'chi hai gavna, or ki hai gavna, means such a case. It's an Aramaic phrase. Ki hai gavna, or such a case, to see if hey, as we'll see in see if hey. In other words, those are responding to people, you need to respond, etc. Tzarich lamar kodem she'adaber eile psukim. You need to say, before you would speak, these verses. Baruch Hashem leolam amen ve'amen. Blessed is Hashem forever, amen, amen. Ad ve'yevarech David. Until you get to Vayivarech David. And when you return to begin from the place that you broke, Yomar Gamken Elu Psukim, you'll say again, Baruch Hashem Leolam, until Vayivarech David. Because that would be like a bracha before and after. In other words, again, every time that you're going to pray, that you're going to do that you're going to talk, so you need to kind of end Psukat Zimra and start Psukat Zimra again. So the Baruch Hashem Leolam kind of ends your Psukat Zimra, and when you say it again, you're beginning it from scratch once more. But Dibur, you should not interrupt with speech. Ve'afilu Baruchu uVaruch Shamor asur lomar. Even this Baruch hu Baruch Shamor, so usually when somebody is saying a prayer, Baruch hu Baruch somebody says Hashem's name, like in a bracha, so we'll say Baruch hu Baruch Shamor. We bless God when we hear His name mentioned. However, during Psukat Zimra asur lomar, it's forbidden to say this. Kaivan, since shelo huzkara b'Gemara, it is not mentioned in the Gemara. The Gemara does not give us this obligation of saying Baruch hu Baruch Shamor. So therefore, that would be considered a bit of an interruption during Psukat Zimra. Aval amein mutar lanot al kol bracha sheshomea, but amein, it is permissible to answer for every bracha that he hears. Afilu be'emtza pasuk shel Psukat Zimra, even in the middle of a pasuk of Psukat Zimra, imhu b'makom desalak inyana, if he is in a place that he has finished the idea, the concept. In other words, we've wrapped up an idea. It's not in the middle of an idea, so then you answer amen. So too, every bracha of thanks, you are allowed to say a blessing. For example, to say asher yatzar after he has done what he needs to do, going to the bathroom. So in the middle of Psukat Zimra, you go to the bathroom, you can come back, you can say asher yatzar. V'chein lanot modim derabanan, so too to answer modim. Let's say the rest of the community is far ahead of you, and they've got to modim in the repetition. You can answer that during Baruch She'amar. V'chein lanot kriyat shema tzibur, so too to answer, in other words, to say together the Shema with the community. Shetzar shikra imahem a pasuk rishon koreh, that you need to read with them the first pasuk as they read it. We should all say the Shema together. So even though I'm in the middle of Psukat Zimra, you should still say the Shema with all of them. And how much more so, kol sheken, that you can respond to, that you can start to answer to Kadesh, Kedusha, and Baruch Hu. Sof Shmoneh Esrei, the end of the Shmoneh Esrei. So you can't say anything right up until the end of the Amidah. So the implication is, from the end of the Amidah, you can start breaking. So he says no. And when there is nefilat apayim, literally nefilah, falling, and apayim is the face. When there's the falling of the face, that is tachanun. When we put our heads down on our arms for tachanun. Lo yedaber, you should not speak ad achar nefilat apayim, after tachanun. So when there is tachanun, so it's not just after that, it's not just until the amidah, it's actually until right after tachanun. The tzorich mitzvah, you are allowed to so you shouldn't interrupt even for the needs of a mitzvah between Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach. So in that whole time, even for the needs of a mitzvah. So what does he mean over here? Pashut, this is obvious. In Michiarei Shi'avor Zman Kriyat Shema, that if he is afraid that it will pass the time for the Shema, Kodem She'agir Likrota, before he will reach to say it, V'seider Tfilah, in the order of the prayer, V'shachach Lo'omra, and he will forget to say it, Kodem Baruch She'amar, before Baruch She'amar, Mutar lo lahafsik v'likrota, it is permissible to make a break and to say it. So actually you can do that at that point halfway through, to stop and say the Shema if you're afraid you won't manage it. So too, if you forgot to say the blessings of the Torah before davening, it is permissible to say the blessing in the middle of Psukei de Zimra, and say afterwards Psukim HaNohagin, the verses that we have the custom to do, the Barukat Kohanim and that. To Yesh Umrim, some say, the Asur Lomar afilu Psukei de Zimra kodem Birkat HaTorah. Some say you are forbidden to say even Psukei de Zimra before you've said the brachas of the Torah, so certainly there's justification to stop and to do it. Ein likrot sefer Torah lechatchila mi she'omed be'emtza Psukei de Zimra. You should not call to the sefer Torah lechatchila in the first place, ideally. Somebody who is standing in the middle of Psukei de Zimra. So in other words, we calling up people to the Torah and somebody came in late, they're still in the middle of Psukei de Zimra, can I call them up to the Torah? Ideally you should not. Rak lekohen im ein sham kohen acher. Only a kohen if there is no other kohen. If he's the only kohen around, okay, so then you can call him up. V'chein leLevi im ein sham elohu. So to a Levi if there's no other Levi. But if you've got options of who to call up, so then you should rather not call up somebody who's in the middle. But the kind of Levi, okay, so you can call them up. Verashai, permissible. Likrot balachash imakore, to read in a whisper together with the Balkore, so that when somebody gets an aliyah, what they can do is read along quietly with the Balkore. Now what if you're in the middle of Psukei de Zimra when you get called up? So you still can read along quietly with the Balkore. However, you should not stop to tell the Chazan to make a Mishaberach. In other words, if they're saying, would you like a blessing for family and friends? So you wouldn't say, okay, yes, and for my sister, and for my cousin, and everything else. You wouldn't do that. And if the Chazan begins by himself making this Mishaberach, and forgets your name and asks you and says, by the way, what is your name? And he asks you, you can reply to him again because of honor. Like we'll see later on, there's a situation where you're giving honor to somebody. Here, giving honor to the community because you're not holding them up in the Torah reading, and giving honor to the Chazan because you're asking a question. And if he's standing close to the chapter where you can finish up to that chapter without waiting, shahut, waiting before you would go up. Yes, okay, and you should do that. You should finish up the chapter you're on. But if it would take a minute, so you just started Ashrei. So, okay, if you can wrap it up before going on, that's better. But if it's going to take a time, lo yishe, you should not wait, mibnei torah chatzibur, for the bother of the community. You're going to keep the whole community waiting so that you can do your davening. No, that doesn't work. Then he says, it is forbidden to say this verse of who can say the greatness, who can speak. This is the verse we say it at the end of Anim Zmirot. Who can speak the power of Hashem, etc., after Baruch She'amar, before Hodu. When we finish the davening, some have the custom to say it. I think what he's saying there is, if you say, who can say the praises of Hashem, so then that kind of undermines what you're about to do. you declare how you can't do it, and then you start doing it. That's a bit weird. If you say all the praise of Hashem and say, but at the end of the day, still we could never come to the great praise of Hashem, okay, that's fine. Yesh again, some of the custom, lomar kaddish kodem baruch shamar, to say kaddish before baruch shamar. V'yesh again lo omro kodem hodu, and some have the custom of saying it before hodu. So some of the custom of saying kaddish before baruch shamar, and some of the custom of saying kaddish before hodu. Okay, yishtabach. So we say it before Baruch Shema. Now, Yishtabach, so you shouldn't stop even for a mitzvah between Baruch Shema and Yishtabach. Aval ben Yishtabach li yotzer lidvar mitzvah. But between Yishtabach and Yotzer, or we can speak for a mitzvah. Yivuar b'soch siman nundalad yesh matin. It will be explained at the end of chapter 54 that there are those who permit it. Alright, now we came to the interruptions. So you can interrupt mipnei hakavod.